Welcome to Book Nibbles. Big ideas, small bites. Ronald Reagan's life was a uniquely American story, a blend of small-town Midwestern upbringing, Hollywood glamour, political ambition, and national leadership during one of the most tense eras of the 20th century. In Killing Reagan, the violent assault that changed a presidency, Bill O'Reilly and Martin Dugard set out to tell not just the story of Reagan's life but to highlight the pivotal moment in March 1981 when an assassination attempt nearly ended his presidency just as it began. The book does more than recount the attack. It explores Reagan's formative years, his Hollywood stardom, his rise in politics, the challenges he faced as president, and how the shooting altered him physically, emotionally, and politically. It presents Reagan as both resilient and vulnerable, offering readers not only a political biography but also a deeply human portrait of a man who carried optimism as his signature trait yet bore hidden scars that shaped his leadership. The narrative begins with Reagan's early life in Illinois, a childhood that had no promise of greatness but rather hardship. He grew up in Dixon, a small Midwestern town, in a modest family. His father, Jack Reagan, was a shoe salesman who battled alcoholism, often moving the family around in search of work. His mother, Nellie, was a woman of strong religious faith who tried to keep the family stable despite Jack's flaws. The contrast between a caring, faith-filled mother and a troubled father influenced Reagan's character profoundly, instilling in him a sense of optimism and resilience. Reagan worked summer jobs as a lifeguard, famously credited with saving dozens of people from drowning, an early demonstration of his leadership and calm under pressure. He earned the nickname Dutch, and this easygoing, approachable personality would stay with him for life. Reagan's passion for storytelling led him to broadcasting, first as a sports announcer on the radio. His ability to make even mundane baseball plays sound exciting revealed a talent for communication. That gift became his ticket to Hollywood. During the 1930s and 40s, Reagan transitioned into acting, starring in films like Knute Rockne, All-American, where he played the dying football player George Gipp. His famous line, "Win one for the Gipper," became not just a Hollywood moment but a political slogan decades later. Reagan was never considered a top-tier actor like Clark Gable or Jimmy Stewart, but he carved out a steady career, playing affable roles that matched his real-life charm. Off-screen, however, Reagan was ambitious, curious about politics, and beginning to shape the ideological convictions that would later define his public life. His first marriage to actress Jane Wyman ended in divorce, leaving him heartbroken but also reshaping his personal life. Reagan's later marriage to Nancy Davis proved to be the emotional anchor of his existence. Nancy was not only his wife but also his most trusted advisor, protector, and confidant. Their bond was intense, sometimes described as insular, but it gave Reagan a sense of stability and comfort. Nancy's role in Reagan's career and presidency cannot be overstated. She monitored his health, controlled his schedule, and acted as a gatekeeper in ways that frustrated staff but ultimately prolonged Reagan's effectiveness. As Hollywood's golden age faded for him, Reagan's political consciousness sharpened. Initially a Democrat, even serving as the president of the Screen Actors Guild, Reagan gradually shifted rightward as he grew disillusioned with the Democratic Party and increasingly aligned with conservative values. The rise of communism abroad and labor battles at home, along with his role as a spokesman for General Electric, sharpened his worldview. His talent for delivering compelling speeches, such as his famous 1964, "A Time for Choosing" address in support of Barry Goldwater, catapulted him into national politics. The speech framed the struggle of the Cold War as a moral choice between freedom and tyranny, and it marked Reagan as a rising star in conservative circles. Reagan's political career took off when he became governor of California in 1966, defeating incumbent Pat Brown. As governor, Reagan dealt with student protests, budget battles, and the complicated politics of a rapidly changing state. His leadership style combined pragmatism with conservative principles, though critics sometimes accused him of being too simplistic. Nevertheless, Reagan gained a reputation as a strong communicator and leader, setting the stage for his presidential ambitions. After unsuccessful runs for the presidency, Reagan finally won the Republican nomination in 1980 and faced Jimmy Carter in the general election. The late 1970s were marked by economic malaise, high inflation, gas shortages, and a sense of American decline, especially with the Iranian hostage crisis dominating headlines. Reagan's optimism and his call for a new morning in America resonated with voters weary of pessimism. In a televised debate, Reagan delivered the memorable line, "Are you better off than you were 4 years ago?" A rhetorical strike that sealed his image as the candidate of change. He won decisively, ushering in a new conservative era. But Reagan's presidency almost ended before it began. On March 30, 1981, just 69 days into his first term, Reagan was shot outside the Washington Hilton Hotel by John Hinckley Jr. Hinckley, a disturbed man obsessed with actress Jodie Foster, believed that killing the president would win her attention. The attack happened in seconds. Hinckley fired 6 shots, wounding a police officer, a Secret Service agent, White House Press Secretary James Brady, and ultimately striking Reagan in the chest. The president was rushed to George Washington University Hospital, where doctors discovered the bullet had missed his heart by less than an inch. Reagan nearly bled to death, but his resilience, humor, and determination to survive stunned those around him. Famously, he joked to the surgeons, "I hope you're all Republicans." Even in pain, Reagan's instinct for levity reassured the nation. The shooting had profound consequences. Physically, Reagan never fully recovered his pre-shooting stamina. His schedule had to be carefully managed, and Nancy Reagan became even more protective, sometimes clashing with staff and advisors. Politically, however, the assassination attempt paradoxically strengthened Reagan's standing. The public admired his bravery and good humor, rallying around him in a wave of sympathy. His approval rating soared, giving him political capital to push his agenda. In this way, the shooting changed the presidency. It made Reagan both more fragile and more powerful. The book details how Reagan navigated the turbulent 1980s, from the economic challenges of inflation and unemployment to the Cold War showdowns with the Soviet Union. His economic program, dubbed Reaganomics, emphasized tax cuts, deregulation, and reducing the size of government. Supporters hailed it as unleashing entrepreneurial energy, while critics argued it favored the wealthy and expanded deficits. Yet Reagan's optimism, his ability to communicate complex policies in simple, relatable terms, and his deep belief in the resilience of the American spirit kept him popular. On the international stage, Reagan confronted the Soviet Union head-on, labeling it the evil empire. His military buildup, including the Strategic Defense Initiative, mocked by critics as Star Wars, put pressure on the Soviets at a time when their economy was faltering. At the same time, Reagan showed a capacity for pragmatism and diplomacy, forming a surprising partnership with Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. Their summits in Geneva, Reykjavik, and later Washington led to arms control agreements and marked a thaw in the Cold War. Reagan's call to Mr. Gorbachev, "Tear down this wall," symbolized his vision of a freer world, a vision vindicated by the eventual fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. Yet Reagan's presidency was not without scandal and struggle. The Iran-Contra affair revealed covert deals that undermined his image as a straightforward leader. Questions about his age and mental acuity emerged, especially in his second term. O'Reilly and Dugard argue that the lingering effects of the shooting, both physical exhaustion and cognitive strain, contributed to moments of detachment and lapses. Nancy Reagan, relying heavily on astrology to schedule her husband's activities, became a controversial figure, but also demonstrated the extent of her concern for his well-being. Despite these challenges, Reagan retained his reputation as the great communicator, someone able to connect with ordinary Americans with sincerity and warmth. The book ends with reflections on Reagan's legacy and his final years after the presidency. Diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in 1994, Reagan retreated from public life with characteristic grace, writing a farewell letter to the American people in which he described beginning the journey that will lead me into the sunset of my life. He passed away in 2004, but his legacy, of optimism, of Cold War victory, of a redefined conservative movement, remains powerful. What makes Killing Reagan distinct from a standard biography is its focus on the assassination attempt as a turning point. O'Reilly and Dugard argue that the violent assault not only endangered Reagan's life but permanently altered his presidency, shaping decisions, relationships, and public perception. They weave together scenes from Reagan's acting career, his family life, his political ascent, and his time in the White House to create a narrative that is accessible, dramatic, and filled with human detail. The book draws readers in with vivid storytelling. The chaos outside the Washington Hilton, the tension in the operating room, the quiet conversations between Nancy and her husband, the backroom debates among advisors, and the spectacle of Reagan on the world stage. The lessons and takeaways are numerous. First, the importance of communication cannot be overstated. Reagan's ability to inspire confidence, even when gravely wounded, demonstrates the power of words and demeanor in leadership. Second, resilience is a defining trait of greatness. Reagan's survival and determination to continue serving illustrate how personal courage can transform political reality. Third, the book highlights how no leader governs alone. Nancy's protective instincts, advisors' competing agendas, and even the actions of a disturbed young man like Hinckley all profoundly shaped history. Finally, Reagan's story is a reminder that optimism, while sometimes criticized as naive, can be a powerful force in uniting a divided nation and confronting global challenges. Bill O'Reilly's Killing Reagan does not shy away from criticism. It examines Reagan's lapses, his reliance on Nancy, and the controversies of his administration. But it ultimately portrays him as a consequential, if imperfect, leader whose near-death experience defined his presidency as much as his policies did. The book's storytelling style makes history vivid and approachable, presenting Reagan not as a distant figure in textbooks but as a man who lived, loved, struggled, and persevered. In conclusion, the story of Ronald Reagan in Killing Reagan is one of transformation, of a small-town boy who became a Hollywood actor, of an actor who became a governor, of a governor who became president, and of a president who nearly died but found renewed strength. The assassination attempt was a violent assault, but it also became a crucible, forging a presidency that would leave a lasting imprint on the nation and the world. Reagan's resilience, optimism, and ability to connect with people made him one of the most influential leaders of the 20th century, and his story continues to offer lessons in courage, communication, and the human spirit's ability to endure. And that's it. Killing Reagan, the violent assault that changed a presidency. Thanks for listening to Book Nibbles. If you enjoyed this bite-sized book,